very excited to have this webinar running today. And thank you to all the participants who registered and showed up.
Welcome everyone. Happy to be here, and it's great to see that many have signed up for the course. It's fantastic. So I'm looking forward to this session.
Hi, Melin, and thank you so much for having us today. Really excited to be part of this panel and about the great outcome we have today. So welcome everyone on this panel. Thank you so much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and to join us for this webinar. These are difficult times. We all feel that heavy weight of that COVID-19 pandemic on our shoulders, and we see and experience how it is changing how we conduct business. Judging from what we see from around the world, this appears to be the new normal. It's just that nobody can really kind of define what this new normal means. And so we are all asking, what is this new normal for me, for my business, for our families, for our communities, and how we interact with partners everywhere. So while it is only human to focus on a quick fix, it is important to remember that the old paradigm of doing things will likely not work in this time of new market uncertainties. The question then is, what can we do to prepare our businesses to be thriving in the future? So over the next 45 minutes, the three of us, Anna, Christian, and I, will share with you 3 actionable steps that you can take today in order to prepare yourself for these uncertainties and to set yourself up better for the future, to plan ahead. As Emily was saying earlier, feel free to drop a question into the Q&A box. We will address them at the end of this presentation. We will also then show 3 examples of how a clear vision for an organization or for people, something that we call a North Star, can actually lead through a crisis. It is important to remember that each crisis always holds also opportunities. It's the trick is how do you discover these opportunities? So we will show you a pathway that prepares you in discovering these opportunities, and it prepares you in future-proofing your business through a combination of preparation as well as initiatives.
So in order to better understand your current concerns, where you stand, we would like to start with conducting a poll, and would ask you to reply to the following question. Which of the following factors negatively impacted your business, especially as a result of the current crisis? So it's a multiple choice question. Please scroll all the way to see what are the possibilities. And we will briefly then show the result and just for everybody to see and say something about it. So thank you, Emmeline, for helping us to do this poll. Just referring back, I guess you all can see majority of you are impacted by the economic outlook. Doesn't look good, we agree on that. Some social factors, consumer behavior, expectations, community engagement, okay, supply chains and policy, regulatory changes, and 26% also check the environment. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I'll close the poll now, and we'll reflect to it at the end of the presentation. There will be another poll. We'll talk about it later. Thank you. So let's move on.
So let's look through the lens at the moment, through a metaphor of like company being a boat or ship on high seas, like stormy weathers we currently sailing on. And we truly can say these are stormy weathers in this crisis, which stops us from continuing on our planned course. Sure, every one of you has taken already measures to mitigate the impacts on your business, to be sure that you stay afloat and take also down the risks there is. The art is to managing this pain, which it is really, but also at the same time, whilst doing that, looking out for the gains. And this might sound a bit abstract at the moment to look for gains out of this crisis, but for sure they are gains, because looking forward and planning ahead, there are opportunities. We will also show you later on how to embrace them. Let's take a helicopter view for the moment. So go a bit higher and look at where we are at the moment and look at this crisis, what it is. And what it is actually is a system level disruption. Now, this term you might have heard several times, systems, but what system in business context actually means is like comparing it to our boat on the sea is like everyone that affects the whole oceans you're sailing on. So all the other companies or boats, there are even people living at the border of the sea, they are impacted by the same effects, like this COVID crisis at the moment. How much the different boats or companies are affected obviously depends on different factors, like the financial strength of companies, the knowledge they have from former kind of storms or weathers, and also, of course, the size and other aspects as well. The good thing is the power is with you. It's in your hands to plan ahead and to learn from this moment and to prepare for the future. But whatever you do, reverting back to the systems analogy or metaphors, whatever you will do as a decision out of this in the future, post this crisis, will have also an effect on the whole ocean, so on the whole system or the whole industry marketplace you're acting or whole clients. And also, it will also affect you in return. So we have an interdependency there, which is quite an interesting aspect when you're thinking in terms of system thinking. So we will be presenting you throughout this webinar about practical ways of how to take this long-term view for your organization to be thriving on this next journey.
So while you're focusing on both the short-term and the long-term action, without unifying purpose that aligns these actions, it will not lead to desired outcomes. Similar to how once upon a time navigators navigated stormy seas and they followed the North Star to guide them to where they wanted to go. Same for organizations. You have to have a North Star to guide you, your organization, to where you want to go. So what is a North Star for an organization? And we like to think about as a guiding visionary narrative that everyone in your organization wants to align behind. It creates a narrative that your people will be passionate to be working towards that kind of future that you create for it. The North Star is a purpose-defining framework for acting and being. It is that purpose that dictates behavior. It is not a statement, and it is not a rhetoric. And moreover, it is not enough to have this kind of purpose just for yourself. It is imperative to create this unifying purpose for everyone around you. And the deeper the meaning of purpose, the thing that makes it all worthwhile, particularly in situations of uncertainty and turbulence like the one we have today, it is more than just, it makes it all worthwhile and people aligning behind it and following you. So the more successful and fulfilled business leaders, they make life easier for everyone and hopefully even better for all their stakeholders. And this drives organizational success in the long term. We all know these celebrity-like leaders, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Richard Branson. What do they have in common? A few things, I'm sure, but most importantly, they're all visionary, effective, inspiring leaders in service of something bigger than themselves. And while you might be the smartest, the most intelligent person in the world, if you can't rally and unite people behind a cause, in the long term, your company going to struggle. So your organization's North Star, therefore, must be holistic and at its core must have a positive impact on the world that manifests itself in all conversations and decisions company-wide. The 3 steps that we're going to share with you today will give you path forward towards the thriving organization. And if you have a North Star, it will unite everything and guide it in that one direction that you want to go.
So keep that well articulated, clearly articulated vision and North Star in your mind as you go through these 3 different steps. So step one is an It's an activity where you involve all of your employees and discover potential disturbances and disruptions that can affect your business. Second then, step 2, is to decide and define the destination. Where do you want to be? Where do you want your organization to be once the crisis is over? And more importantly, why? Why do you want to achieve that destination after you get through the tunnel or through the crisis? And then third and finally, it's about setting a course, setting that direction and helping your organization move forward. And you can do this through transformational leadership. So let's look at these 3 steps in more detail before we illustrate them with the examples. Okay, so step 1 is a fact-finding mission for your organization. It is about identifying any sort of trends that affect you, your business, and how you conduct business, as well as your stakeholders. So this is not just taking into consideration the current Corona crisis, but it's also taking other crises into considerations, socially, environmentally. A strategic foresight professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management, Amy Webb, recommends looking at 11 different areas that can disrupt business as we know it. There are other frameworks to brainstorm these areas of disruptions, but you can start with this one. So this is an exercise that is an opportunity to broaden your perspective, to think outside the box, as well as include as many people from your organization with this. These 11 sources of disruptions are in no particular order. You see them here on the right side. Education, geopolitics, infrastructure, demographics, wealth distribution, environment, telecommunication, technology, public health, government, and the economy. Some of them are a little bit more obvious. Economy is often considered an area of disruption, or technology is often considered that poster boy of technological and disruptive change. And then, of course, currently, the public health crisis that many countries experience because of the COVID pandemic is another area that disrupts businesses. So all of these, it's important to remember that all of these disruptional areas have the potential to bring disruptions that are at the system level. So some of them a little bit more obvious, but don't think that some are irrelevant, because if you do, then they will create blind spots for your organization. Instead, delegate this out and include everybody in your organization to look at these, because valuable brainstorming input often comes from areas where it's least expected. Our recommendation is to get as many employees engaged in this as possible. So if you do that, if we look at now this first step with regards to the environment, you can, for example, identify very quickly how the damages to environment are really reasons for worry for many businesses. We are on track to go beyond the 2 degrees of global temperature rise, 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, if we don't get acting very quickly. But already the climate crisis will bring massive disruptions everywhere, from severe weather to rising sea levels, to droughts and fires, and many more. The risk for businesses are significant. It's not just that your supply chain can be disrupted. It could be the market. It could be prices going up because resources are hard to get by. Maybe some resources are no longer available at all. It could be risk of liabilities. The new consumers, the new group of consumers, do expect companies to be socially and environmentally responsible. Or it could be different regulations that suddenly are much stricter than before. So any of these disruptions through the climate crisis are not very easy to stomach. And while they not come as quickly as the COVID-19, they are on much greater scale and often irreversible. As you continue this exercise, and let's say you turn to education, you will also notice that education is an area of disruption just as much. It provides and affects your talent pool of your future workforce, how you attract and retain them. The current pandemic crisis, actually, it's a really good example to show how these public health and education that are interconnected as areas of disruptions, actually has forced many of us to stay at home. The schooling is being done from home, primary schooling, secondary schooling. So now just think about how does this change a student who is becoming your future workforce when there's an expectations of being managed differently because it's remotely happening, or being upskilled differently because it's happening differently, or because you just work differently because it happens remotely. So these are the sort of areas that you can see where this exercise of step 1, looking in all these 11 different areas, can actually identify very quickly for you and your organization areas that may disrupt your business. And you want to do this earlier so then you are prepared to handle them before they become too big to handle. Let's look at step 2.
So while you're practicing looking through the lens of 11 sources of disruption and discovering your macrocosmos, it is common to then realize that there are newly discovered risks and also newly discovered opportunities. It is common to take these and develop your yearly strategy guided by quarterly returns view. But I invite you to take a step back and to then examine whether the decisions you're making today are actually aligned with your purpose or with your identity. While following the sources of disruption will highlight constantly changing risks and opportunities, your North Star will remain solid no matter what. And it will keep guiding your vision in a direction, your vision and your strategy in that one direction. So practicing reflecting back on that purpose and your North Star will ensure continuous alignment throughout your entire organization. And it will avoid the discontent of your own and your people that could arise from wasted time and effort, creating something that will be just thrown out of the window because yet another disruption coming your way. So let's see. How do you revisit your North Star and articulate your purpose? When you do that, do reflect if it will be relevant in 5 years from now, 10, 20, some even look at 100 years from now. And your company's purpose will not be found by commissioning a thoroughly researched white paper or creating a complicated strategy document, but rather it will be unearthed from within to discover what it is already all about for you. It will emerge organically from an honest interrogation of what you're truly about, what your people are about, and what feels easy to stand behind. And authentic process of discovery of this purpose for your company starts from within. Ask yourself, why does my organization exist? What is the core reason for its being and impacting the world? Then ask your executives, your frontline employees, questions such as, if you can, without referring to any marketing material, what do you think this organization is all about? When was the last time you were proud to work for this organization? What do you want your work to be known for? And these types of open-ended conversation starters often lead to really emotional responses, and they always reveal the fundamental truths about your company. From this process, ideas about how to generate positive social impact will naturally emerge, and they will resonate not just with your employees, but also with your customers. And that is because they are authentic. After you involve your employees in this discovery process, put this idea to life. Check and verify. Share with everyone the challenges with your employees, the challenges the organization faces now, and what are the trade-offs that you're looking at. Share your execution plans, and then ask for their input. Evaluate what worked and what didn't, and what can be improved. But don't ever deviate from the core of who you really are. Is your company's purpose. The benefit of leading with purpose from inside out is that a fear of failure is no longer a factor. And the kind of conversation you will be able to have with all your stakeholders actually will be speaking to that part of their brain that affect behavior. And if the cause feels true to your company, go for it. Be proud and confident to take a stand without worrying about anyone's response. This will open a door for innovation and continuous learning in your organization. And if we look beyond the internal stakeholders, amid this pandemic, insufficient consideration was paid to all stakeholders in decision-making, and that backfired for some companies. Others were stepping up. So in this process, in discovering who you really are, where you want to be, and why, get to identify, to know, and to understand all your stakeholders. What are their needs today? Engage in a dialogue with them and to listen to their needs and to their feedback. So beyond the usual suspects of stakeholders, also look at the community where you operate, society at large, environment, and as you will go on in this process, you will discover many more. By addressing societal and environmental needs, you can expand your markets in ways that benefit society and shareholders simultaneously, while creating values for your customers, for your employees, and for communities.
Now returning to our sailing turn, and you can see that I really love the sailing and the sea. So one of many reasons to live in Singapore, I guess, for many people, is to prepare your ship, your journey. And it goes along the step 2 we have seen where your destiny is, so where you want to go. And step 1, what the likely environmental conditions will be for you when you take that sailing trip. So it's really that you start from your destiny where you want to go and plan backwards and not from the past, really. And always think like the North Star is like guiding you, so you sail under the North Star so you can always orient yourself. So make sure that your boat's features are also prepared and feasible for the journey you're going to take and to wave the disruptive waves that will be in the future. And it comes with leveraging your strengths of your company. So both, let's say, like the products you have in your range, to see at them and how you can also leverage them and adapt them so they become also fit for your future vision you made out in step 2, or the services you provide to your customers. And think about to set aside the financial resources you need to invest in research and development to develop them even further. Also, what about your reputation in the market? That could also be something that you can greatly leverage to also make one of your strengths. Or your brand value, for instance, which is very closely related, but also sometimes different. So in short, look that you create as much enablers as possible from where you stand and also going forward as well. And of course, also what stands in your way. And talking to the second point is like many companies feel it really difficult to let go of things that simply don't work anymore for the future, because they work greatly for the past or the present, like for instance, processes or systems like technical systems or policies. So many find it very hard to let go of them and just to make the way free to create something that you can go for. Also, what's important is that returning on your boat, to stay in contact. Each boat has a radio on board, right? So you can stay in contact, listening where the other boats are going. In the metaphor of the companies, of course, to listen to what's best practices, latest trends, forecasts, and even consider sailing certain segments of your journey with other companies or boats. That means like building alliances with likewise companies to share costs and also probably share profit. And obviously interact the stakeholders, as we said before, especially your clients, for instance, but also your suppliers and the others. We haven't thought about that, as mentioned by Anna before. By doing this, you send excellent positive signals to your stakeholders, including your customers, of being an innovative, trust-building company, and to also create some leeway for the new trials and new plans you're laying ahead in terms of, in case they're not perfect. And they won't be perfect, as you know, and they don't need to be perfect, but they need to be part of that journey as well. And mind you, people just love to be part of something new, where they feel their advice and the collaboration is valued. And they will also not just jump off the boat in the next first instance. Moving on, what's the most important resource you have on a boat or in a company? Many might say, obviously it's your crew, it's your people. And we need just having the right leadership skills to enable the crew to act on its best. And it starts with involving your people. And involving your people is not just into your plans and races and whatever you lined up for to plan your journey, but to already involve them, as we said, in step 1 and 2. So they're really part of that as well. Some say, like, don't sell sausages, sell the sizzle. So that means for your employees, tell them how it's going to feel when you arrive at this destination, and how it's going to be, what they will learn on this journey, because people just love to learn and develop further. So the next leadership skill is foster co-creation. By co-creation, we mean creating something new together, truly collaborative. So that means for you, for instance, when you're going back to your next problem you're facing, to just invite a diverse range of people. And by diverse range of people, I mean people from different functions in your company, independent from their seniority. But the most important is that they have some knowledge around the problem you have. Seem to be people from marketing or from warehouse, it doesn't really matter. Important is the knowledge. And then give them a problem and guide them and coach them. So your role pretty much becomes the one of a coach who asks the right question to make them reflect and to come up with solution. So let them try then to try out new things they developed. So that means like experimenting in a safe space. And trying out in small scale is important without the big investment first to also mitigate your risks, obviously. But let them try something new and set simple and clear boundaries that cannot be crossed, like here on this tennis court on the right-hand side on the image, so the play field, so to say. Example of these rules can be spending money, rules about spending money, or for decision-making, where the principle could be the bigger the decision, the more people have to ask for advice. So by creating this safe space, this playground really, you let people really experiment new things. If the new things fail and the small experiment fail, celebrate the learnings, celebrate the trialing, the courage they had, and not only celebrate, but also gather the learnings, including the positive and negative ones, and let them share them with other teams you have, so they can learn from that for their projects, and you won't multiplicate the errors that happens. This way, you're creating a learning organization, and many companies also tell it an agile organization, where you create more and more expertise in-house, and you're less dependent only from external expertise, especially important for small and medium-sized enterprises. By doing this, by creating these organizations, you create interesting opportunity for key talents, for highly motivated, qualified people to be creative, to be self-managing, and make your organization more healthy and more effective in the long run. Most importantly for yourself personally as leaders, it will remove some of the pressure and some anxiety some of us feel to be seen as a heroic, competent, high-performing leader. And it frees up more time for you to spend in the 3 steps as we lined out here, to lobby for your North Star, look out ahead for upcoming changes, and cultivate and grow your alliances.
Now that we introduced these 3 steps, it is essential to remember that the stronger this vision, the stronger the North Star, the more confidently can you instill clear-headedness into the organization. I like to explain this with a little illustration. Think of your company as a sail, as you can see here illustrated in this image. This sail is pushed by the winds of change. So wouldn't it be great if you could harness this energy and give it direction? What propels an organization is an orchestrated interaction between 3 strategic components. It's your business model, it's your management, your operation, it's the systems that holds everything together, and that creates the contact and with your target market. It's the people in your organization, the organizational design and the organizational structure, as well as your efforts to innovate and identify new market opportunities. So this is why it is important to have a clearly defined North Star, because as it's represented here in this triangle above that sail, because it pulls together all these activity like a powerful magnet pulling metallic pins. Ideally, this North Star survives the test of times. It provides directions, very similar to how the first navigators by sea used the stars to find their direction and go somewhere, as we mentioned earlier. The stronger the North Star, the stronger the alignment, and the more confident can the company face a crisis. And so we will show you now 3 examples of how leadership discovering clear opportunities in crisis can lead people forward. The first example is an example that happened in the crisis that led up to the independence of Singapore in 1965. This was a crisis of geopolitical, societal, as well as personal in nature. Lee Kuan Yew tried until the very end, and he believed very strongly he was able to save that federation between Malaysia and Singapore. And then when he led Singapore into independence as its first prime minister in 1965, his mind was clear on making this island nation a strong, independent country. So policies can be reversed. A North Star that is ingrained as a vision into people's mind is very hard to change. And Lee Kuan Yew understood that. He had a very strong vision of Singapore as a strong economically country. He understood that lifelong learning and education is a foundation to develop leadership and to nurture talent. He realized that it is essential to set high standards economically and socially. And so if you think about it, who would have thought back in 1965 that Singapore will consistently show on the world's best lists today? Who would have thought that Singapore would be recognized internationally as a modern world city of the highest standard? It's the power of a well-defined North Star, a well-defined vision that rallies people behind the cause. So now if you look back at the 3 steps that we introduced earlier, you can see sort of the reference there. It is clear that Lee Kuan Yew understood that to counter the geopolitical and societal challenges that Singapore experienced is to unite Singapore together under one goal. He also articulated very clearly what this destination of Singapore could be, and people believed it. And he involved all the various stakeholders to ensure that nobody was left behind. So there was a North Star that rallied people, and it's been the guidance for Singapore for decades.
I love this idea of cause. But please hold on to this for a minute, to this thought. I want to ask you, would you pay for a campaign calling not to buy your product? Patagonia did. The disruptive ads, "Don't buy this jacket," were placed to coincide with a consumer buying frenzy that is Black Friday. Patagonia ads were not some sort of bizarre trial or experiment or impulse to commit a commercial suicide. However, it was an anti-consumerist message that targeted their customers, asking them not to buy more than they absolutely need for their lifestyle or for their environment, to put higher value on equality, reusability, something of a purpose and memories over disposability. So how come the more Patagonia rejects consumerism, the more the brand sells? And the reason for that is their North Star. Far from something blandly typical along the lines that we make the best equipment to make the best out of outdoors adventures. It is simpler and much bolder. We are in business to save our home planet, they say. Oh, that's a big cause here. And not that Patagonia started with the ideal to do things differently. nor was it a socially and environmentally responsible company from day one. In fact, when they started in 1973, what today Patagonia is, it was just this, from the backyard, Yvon Chouinard, its founder, was looking for ways to make easy money to found his climbing expeditions. What made the company change was seeing the environmental degradation and pollution everywhere, and also realizing that they too were part of this problem. On Patagonia website, you can read more about the how company evolved over time, but also how what they're standing for is guiding all their actions and choices. More specifically, they aim to use the resources they have, such as their voice, their business, and their community, to do something about climate crisis. This purpose they have gave rise to their values. Here written on green sticky notes, you can read, build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to protect nature, and that they're not bound by convention. These in turn gave rise to priorities, and the entire company stands behind these priorities, such as the planet even over everything else, employee well-being even over profit, and diversity even over culture fit. And all this paid off. Patagonia is an American best known and the world's most influential brand in outdoor wear. As of 2018, Patagonia is worth $1 billion US. Moreover, they're number 6 on the list on the list of 2018 and 2020 of the world's most innovative companies. And it is Patagonia's North Star and their values and priorities that direct everything they do. And they do it successfully and profitably. They also invest in material sciences. They invest in many small startups and companies that are aligned towards their North Star. They have the same vision and the same purpose. They now are invested in clothing and repair program, even food, regenerative agriculture, you name it. So by engaging all their stakeholders in the fight for a healthier planet, Patagonia thrives even further. Reflecting back to the 3 steps that we mentioned, Patagonia is a great example that shows all the threads are there. From the disruptions, they took on themselves environment and society as being paramount to their business. You can see that the purpose guides all their decisions and actions. And they definitely have an agile and visionary leadership that puts everyone in the same direction, aligned behind their North Star.
Our third example is an industry that was hit really hard by this crisis, an F&B industry, food and beverage. The crisis has forced many small food and beverage companies to make a tough choice, pivot their business models or risk laying off and further economic troubles. Meet Hungry, it's a 200-people catering company based in the US that connects top chefs with businesses looking for high-quality food offerings. Rather than do what everybody does in the food service industry right now, just sort of hungering around down and trying to survive, Chairman and CEO of Hungry said, let's try to innovate our way out of this. He took a strong stand, committing to not letting go of the team and to working together to define the company's new purpose. Knowing that everyone needs to eat and knowing that there are many who have been laid off and cannot afford their next meal, they have decided to shift the company's business model to at-home food deliveries, where users can order meals for up to 8 people, cooked by local chefs and delivered right to their doorsteps. Already under the initial business model, Hungry donated 1 meal to someone in need for every 2 meals purchased. They now continue these donations, giving 4 meals to families in need for every meal ordered. And this is amazing. Being guided by the North Star, everyone needs to eat, they were able to come up with another business model to stay in business during these challenging times. Considering all its stakeholders, leveraging on its network of chefs who cook great food, remarkable logistics and delivery capabilities, the company managed to reinvigorate its business, reached out, tightened and expanded its stakeholder network, and ensured their team remains cohesive and committed. So now let's have a look how they embrace the 3 steps we were telling you earlier. The first step is, step 1, they addressed the disrupted wealth distribution. So people were out of their jobs, they didn't have to spending money anymore, so there's a wealth distribution which was disrupted. They addressed that by their new offering to also supply at home giving for meals for free. They aligned their vision with their purpose as well. So they didn't leave their North Star, which is everyone needs to eat. So they based it underneath the old star, North Star, and then embraced the new. And through strong leadership, through their CEO, they stayed united and committed to this new purpose as well. So excellent examples of how the steps 1 to 3 with the North Star works. Of course, some of you have shareholders, and as we know, that sometimes is a countering kind of priorities in terms of short-term and long-term. But let's have a look at the latest study of 2017 of McKinsey, which looked at agile organizations and how the investments and the time of changing leadership and the way they operate to create these agile organizations pays off. And it's a staggering 30% plus in productivity, which obviously we all know comes with cost savings, and also a faster time to market of 1.5 times. So imagine that figure, 1.5 times faster to the market of a new innovative product or service, which of course creates shorter cycles of return investments. And on the employee front, a plus 30 in the employee net promoter score. So I think you're all with us to say, like, it pays off also financially, and it's also a talking point for your shareholders or for your investors as well.
So now, after we've shared with you that uncertainty is here to stay, that system-level disruptions are not a one-in-a-lifetime event. And after we've shared with you what you can start doing today to ensure that your organization will remain resilient in the face of future disruptions, we really would like to know, what opportunities do you see now for your organization? So we're launching the second poll. Please answer all the questions, all the answers that apply to you. And we will show the results shortly after during the Q&A.
It was interesting from the first poll to see that technology scored really low as a potential source of disruption right now. It was only at 11%, and even health, even though health is somewhat related as something that's currently happening. So curious to see how the opportunities now show up in this poll.
Yeah, we will show the results of the poll during the Q&A, so we can refer back to what Jake. Emmeline, if you feel like everyone had answered, then we're okay with closing the poll the moment you feel it's the time.
You can keep it in the background and let the participants answer it for the next 5 minutes. Then after 5 minutes, I'll be closing the poll and we'll share it at the Q&A later.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start wrapping up.
Yeah. Okay. So as we are wrapping up this webinar, I'd like to leave you with some food for thought. Think about it. At the beginning of this year, 2020, we all had very different ideas of how this year is going to be. We had very different plans of who we want to be working with, where to grow, and what to do, what type of activities we wanted to do. Everything changed very quickly, and it changed us. What was your personal North Star that guided you through all this, despite it all? We like to encourage you to work through these 3 steps. The companies that invest into understanding their place in this new world of uncertainties will come out stronger when they imagine how they will fit in, how they can provide, despite these disruptions, social, environmental, as well as economic, financial value to the economies and to the organization. And then secondly, setting a bright and well-articulated North Star for your business will provide clarity in terms of direction. It will give purpose to your organization. You want to have an organization that has a very clearly well-defined social vision and mission, because you want to attract the right type of customers, the right type of talent that want to work for you. And at the same time, it will ensure that you stay authentic to your brand values. And then finally, leveraging your organization's strength and expertise, whether that's for your organization as well as your stakeholders, your supply chain and your partners, will instill confidence and clear-headedness into your organization when you communicate to stakeholders and when you look out for collaborations. So thank you for attending this webinar, and thank you for your time and engaging with us. We now open it up for Q&A. There were already, I saw 2 questions coming in. But while you're thinking of questions, just wanted to remind you that we can help you with discovering and articulating a clear North Star for your organization, and as well as setting strategies related to innovation and strategy and to organizational design and leadership development. So thank you again. So there was one question earlier that came in that was about elaborating more about North Star and how company can adapt it. I sent a quick note. I would, my note here was about, and something that we addressed a couple of times in this presentation, is to ensure that you involve everyone. Right? This is not a North Star. It's not necessarily. It's not something that you can sort of impose onto somebody. That it is something that people need to sign up for. And Anna, maybe you can expand this a little bit more. You looked at Patagonia quite a bit. What do you think is sort of a good example that a company can adopt, ensures that the North Star is well adopted within an organization?
Thank you, Jake, and thank you all for the questions that are coming in. It's a very important question. I think in step 2, what we shared, that it is really through this interrogation, asking the people in your company and broader stakeholders, asking these questions that will evoke real emotions, and a certain story will start emerging and coming up. I know it kind of sounds a little bit maybe fluffy, but really, because what organizations are all about, they're not about goals, and they're not buildings, and they're not documents, stuff written on, they're people. It's all about people, and we as people are driven by our emotions, and it is our emotions that then dictate how we are being. So creating this kind of sense of inquiry, and then bringing everyone together to this broader conversation about what we're all about. I see that this really brings companies together. Also, the example of Hungary, it's that, even at this adverse reality that is happening right now, a small F&B, relatively small F&B, said, no, we're not closing, we're not letting go our people. And they sat together for a few days and kind of brainstorm what is it that they're about, how they're going to really now be able to address what is it that they're about. So a big goal, a big vision that you might never get there. Will Hungary ever feed all people in the world? No, but it opened up a space for them to be really creative, finding opportunities that are ready for them to take right here, right now, and they're going to stick to it in the future after the pandemic is over. So thank you for this question.
Christian, there was one question here that's, it wasn't a chat box, but I picked it up. It says, does can it be effective to have a North Star, even if you're a small company with less than 10 people? So it speaks a little bit sort of the organizational structure and design. Do you think that's possible?
I think that's what small companies and startups coming up with is an idea, a passion for something. And quite often it starts with you as an entrepreneur. You see something, you hear something, you anticipate something, and it probably goes pretty long along your talents and your skills and your interest. And this already in itself is a North Star. What we see is like some startups, they grow fast, hopefully. And sometimes the North Star gets kind of forgotten or lost because they kind of tend to react to short-term changes in the market. And this is actually why we say it's so important to keep this North Star in view, not just big companies, but even for smaller companies. I would say even for the smaller companies, it's even more essential because the impacts of a wrong decision has more major impacts on the bottom line. So yes, please ask yourself, whoever asks a question or you're asking yourself, is like, what is the purpose why I created this company and why I want to be there, the why? And have a good conversation again with your people. You know, like, again, sell them the sizzle, not the sausage. It's like how it's going to feel, why you want to go there. And if you get feedback from your people that probably the market has changed so much that you have to really change the purpose, then you should do that probably. So I think it's really, really vital for small and medium-sized enterprises, especially.
Yeah, and that's a great point. On that mission-driven that often smaller companies are, that it's actually a little bit more wider accepted that which mission a company has. But it can be a challenge if it's not clearly well defined, and that would be a good exercise to go through.
I would like even to add that North Star is relevant for individuals as well. Yeah. What is your purpose in life? And that's not an easy question to answer. It takes sometimes really long time, maybe the whole lifetime, to discover what is it that you're about. So yeah, it's relevant to everyone and each of one of us.
Yeah.
I may just pick up another.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one that just jumped in my head is around what if the North Star of a company is kind of resistant to adapting to new ways. And very good term here, kind of convince the old star. So the old star instead of the North Star. Obviously, we can only assume what this participant meant with it. But for me, I sense there's something about a generational change. And let us assure you, generation changes are an important factor as well. And the interesting studies of developing countries and developed countries, how they change general. And we have a worldwide shift of these intergenerational topics of priorities and also personal traits, simply because, like Singapore, this is a different stage at where generations grew up. Same for other Western countries in Europe and the US, for instance. So it's an interesting topic to look into that. But what I would say here is like also celebrate the heritage and don't just leave everything behind, but only build up on it if it really serves you for the future where you want to go. And if you talk about a generation change in companies, then also invite maybe the founder of the companies to really look at new factors and the step one, like where the market is going, because of course they want to be also celebrated for their efforts they take. So it's different factors here, but it's important to involve them and to also tell them what's going on and about the complexity in the world we live in versus maybe more in an industrial revolution time where the whole kind of leadership paradigms grew. All of us, including myself, we grew up in the business schools as well. So it's a big topic, but just a few ideas here.
I would add to this as well. The way the question is formulated, right? The old star liking to keep old methods and is resistant to new ways. Yeah. It's also important to differentiate. North Star is not methods. You could have a North Star that is old, and still provide different ways of going about, of accomplishing or using it as a guidance. So the North Star for Patagonia is, we are here to save our planet. That is true in 200 years as it was 200 years ago. But how do you go about doing this is a slightly different way. So, I mean, think of the North Star really, when we discussed it, it's when you set out from England on the boat, you're going to New York, the North Star is right up in the sky. You will never go to that star itself, but it will give you a direction, right? Your destiny is New York City. But, and how do you get there is everything that you do on the boat. But the North Star is this one thing that sits there and that will guide you. So it can be old. It's just a way of how do you want to go and actually get there. And that is this exercise where these 3 steps come in. And somebody mentioned 3 objectives. They're actually 3 steps, right? The first one is, where are you today and how do you fit into a world of uncertainties? The second one is, what's your destination and why? And the third one is, how do you get there? And then everything that Christian just mentioned sort of comes in there as well. It's this process of going there.
Good add-on. Thanks, Jake. It's very valid. Yeah.
Then there was a question here. We are an organization providing B2B service for offices which require manual labor. Since most offices will be working from home for the foreseeable future, what are the changes we can adopt? So that's a tough one, and I think that's very, very critical for most businesses where remote working is not necessarily the most intuitive way of moving forward. Anna, do you want to maybe sort of take that on and see what can be done that somebody can, in this situation, identify as an opportunity to move forward, or how to approach that?
Yes, it's an excellent question, really, because yeah, this is the new reality, and how do we work with it, and how do we still kind of envision the future we want to be at? And I think, again, going back to remembering that your organization is all about your people, and it's your people that make up the organization. So I would suggest just check in with them, like be really honestly, authentically curious about what is happening with them. How is it for them to work from home? What are the challenges? Maybe there's something you can do. Maybe you can have some Friday night drinks together over Zoom. I do this with my girlfriends and it's really nice. It's not the same, but it is nice, and it gives still the sense of we're in it together and we're a community. And I think that's where the strength of organization steps up. And you're then also communicating something that you stand for, like we're in it together, we're family, we're together. And I think even in its own, this narrative is important and quite powerful too. So that's my first kind of take on how would I do this.
What comes to my mind immediately is like written B2B services. Obviously, we don't know much details about it. Offices here, serving offices. But reminds me a bit of the Hungary case, because they also were in B2B services. So serving catering for companies, businesses. And they shifted to B2C. So probably there's something about, since people are working from home, and all of us, I think we had to adapt, maybe not just queuing in front of IKEA and buying new desks and stuff like this, but there is a growing need of maybe home equipment. But I don't know what this company, of course, is doing. But some of your services could also be maybe B2C. So probably think about that. Again, go to step 1. What changed there? And what could you take as an opportunity to shift yourself? But maybe you stay in the same business, but you just shift your services and your products a little bit. And probably that works, but of course it needs a bit more details around it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it here as well. It's a perfect example to use these 3 steps, right? If you look at Hungary, it made that switch, but their North Star or their idea of their purpose of being did not change. They just realized that the old way of catering food to offices is no longer relevant because there's nobody in the office because of the social distancing and the lockdown that some cities and countries have experienced. So likewise, if you're in this business, any business has expertise and strength and products and services and know-how. How can you apply that to a changed business world? And these 3 steps that we've given you is sort of an is sort of a pathway towards this. You identify where are the areas of possible disruptions, because disruptions also can be opportunities. And then when you have a clearly defined North Star, the opportunity is then to see, well, what could be the destination for us to reach? Very similar as Hungary said, we continue serving food. Now it's just a different type of people that we're serving too. And then once you have identified this, well, then it's about how do we get there? And that's the step 3, setting the course, leveraging everybody, build new alliances. Often the disruption like this is a good opportunity to reach out to new partners that you did not been working with before. So that's maybe a way how I would identify that as well. It's a really good example to go through these 3 steps and apply under a North Star, apply them to your business.
Yeah.
And then there's one more question here. So among all the factors, what in your views are the key factors to future-proof business in general? So that is a quite general, broad question. And to some extent, I believe that our presentation has sort of tackled each one of them a little bit. But do any of you want to go and take a step at it first?
Yeah, I can start.
Anna? Yeah.
I think the concept of future-proof to me kind of lands as if, you know, we try to wrap up this baby, like just learning to walk in a lot of cushioning layers to prevent it from falling, when in fact, by falling and finding ways to get up, the baby learns how to walk. So honestly, there is no such thing, I believe, future-proofing. And I think it's about accepting that life is unpredictable, life is uncertain, and understanding, looking into the future and kind of analyzing and looking into all the trends and not trends, but the sources of disruption rather, really, and trying to connect it to your business and see, okay, where are the risks, where are the opportunities? That will keep you agile. And I think instilling this agility and the ability to constantly move with the flow of time and the changes that we're experiencing, that is the future-proofing process of your business. But in itself, there are no 1, 2, 3 things you can do that will say, okay, it's from now and forever. It's this, you know, very liquid and developing these capabilities in your organization that I think we believe, the 3 of us believe, that will help to withstand future uncertainties and turbulences that are coming.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
Christian, do you want to add anything? Or
I just thought maybe the factors that really related, as you said, to the first step, right? And then we've seen from the survey first, most people here in this participants on this webinar are really concerned, obviously, about the economic factors at the moment, as well as the social factors, consumer behavior, workforce expectations, community engagement. So this is very obvious. And again, this needs to be managed now. But the question is about future-proofing business in general. And most probably, it's probably not these factors that are so obviously disrupting now. So be curious and get to the other ones. And with my people and leadership brain and lens, of course, involve your people. I know we said it many times, but the reason it's just because of this VUCA world we live in, this complexity where it's just that one leader or leadership or board team cannot just gather all information. And until decisions are taken, pilots are done, and accountabilities are given out, it could be that already the context has changed. That's why this co-creation is so important, because it's less plannable. And with more people involved, you have not only more brains and creativity, you're more flexible as well. And again, as we said in step 1, give it out to your people and make them little researchers for you. And don't just use them for execution, but really with the whole being, humanly, and also from brain perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to that. I think so too. The key factors for me will be, I believe that after this COVID-19 crisis will slowly, hopefully, disappear soon. But one thing that it will help us change in our businesses and where we have to change is the social as well as the environmental component. I think this old, I'm now already calling it old, it's no longer that old actually, but this old way of living in abundance and just producing and marketing and selling stuff to people, I think that will change. I think it will change in such that it will be much more important for companies to be engaged socially and to be committed environmentally and really walk that talk. So I think that is I think a direction we see, and that is a direction where a business can do steps that will help with future proofing as well. There's another question, but before we go, maybe you look at the sharing results, the poll results. What opportunities do you see now for your organization? And the biggest one seems to be technology adoption. Just barely, no, actually, no, new business model. New business model is first, and that makes sense. That I think is clear in many industries and many sectors. And then technology adoption is a very quick second. Second in place. And then we have developed innovation capabilities. We have examined what works and what doesn't work as sort of places 4 and 3. And then reduce organizational rigidity. So, yep. That's interesting to see. Just anything unexpected out of this for you, Christian or Anna?
Technology is still, of course, being strong and always important. But as we said before, we can't go through all of them and make assumptions. But we should not just look at them in an isolated manner. But as you said earlier in the webinar, Jake, I think it was you, to say they are interconnected, right? So it's the new business model top. Of course, it has to do with technology adoption. So digital kind of transformation and sorts, and examine what works and what doesn't is also something I'm really kind of like smiling at here to see that 53% think they're ready to examine what works and what doesn't, which has to do with a bit of experimentation. And I think if we have brought it to the point where you said like, yeah, maybe it's safe to do that in a small scale, I think that would be a great outcome, which could help with all the other factors to try new things in business model creation and all the other develop innovation capability on the others as well.
Yeah, I love to see that new business model is something that came quite high, as well as innovation capability, absolutely. And taken, I think, with some other points, engaging with all stakeholders and examining what works and what doesn't work, I think this indeed gives a holistic picture of everything working together towards a better future, not for the company and for its stakeholders. I really very happy to see this this outcome. This for me says this is the takeaway. Hopefully that's what it means. This is the takeaway from our webinar. So
and reach out to the other members of the SCCCI, which is a perfect platform again from learning each other. Don't isolate yourself with that. It's much more fun to do that with others. Give some information, get some information. It can only be good together.
Yeah. There's one last question here. I don't know, Emily, how we are doing on time. Can we address this one, or are we?
Sure. Let's take one last question.
Okay. Yeah, this is a tricky one too. So how can we incentivize employees for working from home? As some might be thinking that utility bills are higher and employees will benefit more on lower operating costs. So there's a couple of things with this one. there's two things I would to say. If you, I'm sure, and I don't know for sure, but I would expect somebody working for Patagonia being very much dialed into that vision of what they're doing is important, to provide, you know, clothing that really drives them, and that also provides value, environmentally value and social value. So there is a little bit of that as we said earlier, this, when you have a purpose, people will work for you, and these sort of other aspects will somewhat become a little bit of a minor point because you put your heart and soul into this. But of course, that is an issue, right? If companies will suddenly save because nobody goes to work, that is something that I think governments in general will need to look into this a little bit. It probably requires some policy-related guidance there as well. And it's likely that it's not going to be going on forever. The flip side, of course, is that employers that rent large offices still have these rents of large offices, and nobody is going actually into it. So these ones are, of course, also running costs for the employers. So this really, there's a couple of facets to answering that question in the best way. It's a little bit also out of scope as well of our presentation, but I believe that once you drive a really strong purpose, that and obviously looking at what the industry doing is with regards to incentives can help. Anna, you want to add to that?
Yes, I want to just perhaps reflect for a second on how often startups operate. So startups is a bunch of people who found their common interest and common passion. And they often come together, not just work in a way for free, but rather they really invest their own money, their own funds, and their own efforts and everything for quite some time before they get somewhere and get investors. So this only tells us, if we really reflect on how people behave, right? It is that being aligned behind a common goal, that often people are then willing to give from themselves without necessarily being paid for it. So this is something important, and I think staying in communication with your people and sharing what your organization is going through. I mean, you assume that they assume. I don't know if that is true. Do they know for sure that you have lower operating costs? Maybe yes, maybe no, but being in that communication, as we shared, you know, start implementing these things that we suggested, that if you share with your employees, where do you stand? What are your challenges? What are the trade-offs you're looking at? What are the plans you have for the foreseen future? And what is their role? And then ask, what do they think about it? And see how they will react. And it will be really interesting, I believe.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think that's actually a really good way of closing this webinar. If you have any more questions, I think, Emily, you will provide some sort of communication going forward. You see on the screen the LinkedIn QR codes, so feel free to connect with us as well individually. But we are happy to get back to you about any sort of help that you may need. So thank you again from the three of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, Jack, and Kristen, for sharing your insights with us. I've enjoyed the beautifully crafted slides, and thank you for the encouragement and inspiration. We hope everyone will find their North Star to guide your way forward in the uncertainty and changes. As we close off this webinar, please let us know your thoughts through the feedback survey form. Do also fill it in if you'd like to have a copy of the slides, or if you have any other follow-up questions that you would like to ask the speakers, we'll be forwarding it to them. So we will be flashing the QR code on screen shortly, or you can follow the redirect link after you leave Zoom. So with that, please do stay connected with SCCCI as we have more webinars coming up. Please feel free to attend them. With that, I will say goodbye for now and see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.